Thank you.
Yeah.
Pleasure. All right, I'm going to bring a chair over here. This is a mock podium. 2 rules of public speaking. Always keep a run down there so you have a little crutch, something to fall back on, and gum chewing. You don't chew gum. That's one of the most important things. I didn't get a lot of sleep last night, and it's because I'm really excited to be here today because this stuff is really important to me. Anyone who's ready to become a journalist, first and foremost, has to realize that you're really taking on a role of a public servant. So this is really a chance for me to give back a little bit, because every step of the way, I know my career sounds really boring, but I'm going to try and lighten it up a little bit. But every step of the way, someone was always there offering help, and this is a great place, the Career Center. You know, here you guys are, blossoming and getting to know what you want to maybe do for the rest of your lives, and there's always people around every corner to help you out if you're willing to look for it. Okay, so if you're just here for the free pizza, don't tune me out until after this story, because I think it'll come back and you'll remember this one of these days. So I was home for Christmas. Being a news guy, you have to get used to working weekends and holidays. So this past holiday was my every 3 years off, and so I was home with my parents in my hometown of Snohomish, Washington. And I come up the first morning after sleeping downstairs, and my dad says to me, "So how'd you sleep?" And I said, "Not that good." And he's like, "What, new, strange bed or what's going on?" And I said, "Well, I had this nightmare that I have like twice a week. And it wakes me up in the middle of the night and I can't get to sleep." My reoccurring nightmare starts like this. So all of a sudden here I am in an old classroom at Washington State University, and I'm sitting in one of those old rickety wooden desks that you guys have probably never sat in before, that has one of the built-in writing pads like that. And all of a sudden I realize I'm sitting in a classroom that I've only been to about 3 times thus far in the semester, and it's the end of the semester. And it's like, how did I screw this up? And then I get out my notebook, and I can still feel the notebook, how I had the same notebook all 4 years of college. And then I flip to the back where I used to keep my syllabuses. And I've got 1, 2, 3 that look familiar, 4 look familiar, and in the very back there's a 5th syllabus. And I have been forgetting to go to a class for basically the entire semester. And I think to myself, you got to fix this. You can fix this. You can do this. How do you do this? And then I tug on a neighbor's sleeve, and it's like, hey, I know this guy. Yeah, how you doing, man?
We're both here.
Yeah, good to see you guys. They work on the hockey crew with me. So I tug on this guy's shirt, and I'm like, hey, can you help me with your notes or something like that? And he kind of covers up like, no, you can't have my notes. And then I say to this other girl, I'm like, okay, I've missed like 2 months worth of class. Can you help me get through this? And she's like, you're in big trouble, buddy. And then somewhere along the line, I always find a way. I sleepwalk a tiny little bit, so I wake up and I go to my fridge, and then I look at the pictures of me on my refrigerator, and it's about the time I'm having a drink of water I realize, oh my God, I'm all grown up and I'm not in college anymore. Thank you so much. So you guys, I guarantee you'll have that dream at least 1 or 2 times, as you get older. So the introduction to me. So I'm your humble and loyal public local news sports guy. So that's me right there. I work at KUTV, which is a local CBS affiliate in Salt Lake City, and I'm in my 8th year. In July, it'll be my 8-year anniversary. So how did I happen? So as a little kid growing up in Snohomish, Washington, I think there's 3 main things that you can go back to my childhood and trace to how I became a sportscaster. First and foremost, I'm a sports junkie. All I wanted to do when I was a kid was play baseball. It was everything to me. Collecting the baseball cards. I grew up in about 40 minutes from Seattle, and I was a huge Seattle Mariners fan. And my dad and I had a deal. If I mowed the lawn and earned money and bought the tickets myself, he would drive me in rush hour traffic after he got done teaching high school, and we'd go to Mariners games. So for a 7 o'clock game, we'd get there about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, so I could go down and try and meet the players and get autographs and try and take pictures and shag baseballs and do. All I wanted to do was be at the ball game and always imagine what it would be like being on the playing surface. And all these years later, when my dad finally broke the news to me one day, Adam, I hate to break the news to you. You're my son and I love you, but you're not going to be a professional baseball player. I was really angry at him for a long time after that. But I thought to myself, what can I do to stay as close to the arena as possible? And it was to become a sportscaster. The second tool to maybe how I became to be is I've always had kind of an innate knack for writing. I've always had kind of a way with words, whether it was just, I remember being a little kid and trying to write a short story before I even knew how to write. And I took my mom this dribble and she's like, oh, good, honey. And I'm like, no, but there's some good stuff here. You got to try and read it. But I always had a knack for words. So here's this, and standardized testing was a big thing too. So next thing you know, as a little kid, my English scores started coming back real good. And my mom was really proud. And I was like, don't tell anybody. I don't want anybody to know because I'm a jock, I wanted to be a jock, but beneath all this, I had a knack for writing. And I think I was in the 5th grade, and I entered an essay writing competition. I just saw a flyer for it, and the grand prize was a whopping $10. And I thought, well, okay, I'm going to try and get this $10. And so the topic it was the centennial in Washington State, and why do you love the state of Washington so much? And so I remember just going down, I skipped a recess period, went down into the library at my elementary school, and just wrote a real heartfelt essay about why I love the state of Washington. And I talked about the wildlife and going on hikes with my parents, and talked about how I loved the sight of a meadow with wildflowers, and I thought it was so neat that we lived close to the ocean. And next thing you know, at the assembly, and it was a whole school-wide competition, and I ended up beating out who went on to be a National Merit Scholar and won the $10 grand prize. So next thing you know, the cat's out of the bag. Adam has a knack for writing, and that really is the basis of everything when it comes to news. And then the third thing, probably the third main thing being a kid that led to my career path, I've got family in the industry. I've got an aunt and uncle who are really polished and well-known media personalities in the Spokane market. And about the time I was 11 years old, the same year I wrote that essay, I saw my uncle on TV for the first time. And it was like, oh my God, Rick's on television. I looked at my mom, and it was her little brother, and I was like, are you seeing this? Rick's on TV. And she's like, I know, honey, good. And I was like, Mom, that's what I want to do. And she says, okay, good, honey. And I kind of set my sights on doing this stuff when I was really young. So I went to the Edward R. Murrow School of Communication at Washington State University. Does anybody know who Ed Murrow was? Okay, he's one of the pioneers of how this whole thing got going. He was one of the original television anchors, and his catchphrase was "Good night, good luck." You could see him sometimes smoking an unfiltered cigarette on newscasts, and that's how different things have changed over the years. So I went to Washington State University, and I took the communications route on kind of a broad perspective. I had an emphasis in public speaking, and then I got involved in sports video. And so at a Pac-12 school like Washington State University, there's a big emphasis in athletics. We had my sophomore year, the Cougars, led by a villainized figure by the name of Ryan Leaf, who's actually turned out to be a pretty good guy, went to the Rose Bowl for the first time in 60 years. I was on the field for every single one of those football games, and it was kind of my introduction to college football. So basically, to get into sports video, I showed up to a meeting because a friend of mine in the dorms was talking about how he was learning cameras and all this behind-the-scenes stuff, and he was getting paid for it too. I was like, well, I want to do that. So I went with him to a place like this, to a career center type place, and sat in the room, and basically the crew chief said, who wants to work today? Everybody raised their hand. So he picked 8 random people and said, okay, to the rest of you, better luck next time, come back next week. So I kept showing up until I got picked. And the next thing you know, I was doing everything from stage managing and lighting and running a little bit of camera. And one of the craziest jobs in TV is you hold this big parabolic dish. You just stand there with this big thing that absorbs sound from all the way across a football field. But there's all kinds of different ways that you can get your introduction there. I also dabbled, I minored in theater. I thought acting was a really fun thing to do, so I minored in theater when I was at Washington State. And not that, being a television anchor is acting, but sometimes you do have to kind of put on a brave face, and so that stuff always comes in kind of handy. So I graduated from the Edward R. Murrow School of Communication. I really did get just a wonderful education. I got everything I paid for. By the way, just before the first of the year, I paid off my student loans. And all of you will hopefully know how good that feels one of these days. Yeah, thank you very much. I love that. Thank you. It's like the greatest feeling ever. So after graduating from college, I remember having kind of a fateful phone call with my father. Sorry, I'm going to take a drink of water here real quick. And it was about a month before graduation, and we used to talk once a week. And he says, so how's things going? Are you getting excited? And I told him flat out, I was like, I'm a little bit scared. And he's like, what are you afraid of? I said, well, I really thought that I'd have a job lined up at this point, but I don't have anything solid yet. And he said, well, the important thing for you right now is just to finish strong, enjoy yourself a little bit, take a little bit of time off, and just kind of, do a little R&R, and then something will inevitably come up. And something inevitably came up. In Bellevue, Washington, which is just a stone's throw from where I grew up, basically everybody knows what ESPN is. When ESPN started getting really big, all the other networks said, you know what, we can do that. And none of them really were able to do it. But Fox Sports decided they were going to do a national sports report that was going to mirror what ESPN Sports Center had become. So really good-looking anchors, no tie, a little bit of pizzazz, music, flair, all that stuff. And it was going to be a highlight-driven show. And then that was going to be a half hour, say from 11 to 11:30. And then from 11:30 to midnight, they were going to do regional programming. So that's where Fox Sports Northwest came into play. So we focused on schools mostly in the state of Washington, then a lot of schools and pro teams in the state of Oregon, and then a little bit of Idaho too. So just about the time I was graduating, they were creating this show, and they were looking for a lot of young people to come on and be production assistants. Now, what a production assistant is it just means that you're there to get pushed around and given the odd jobs. They're not fun, they're not sexy, but it's your foot in the door at a good place. So I remember, I should backtrack a little bit. This is going to blow your mind. I graduated from college in the year 2000, and I think maybe a year prior or a year after, I was the last of this generation to graduate without a cell phone in my pocket and without an email account. True story. So I get handed a note card, second semester, my final semester in my senior year, and it says, name, Adam Mikulich, phone number, put down my phone number, email. And I tap the guy next to me and I say, what the hell is an email? and he goes, oh, it's this online mail thing. And I'm like, what? And he's like, you can write letters online and send them to people. And I was like, well, that just doesn't make any sense at all. So, I graduated without an email address. It's crazy. And then anybody watch Saved by the Bell? It reruns at this point. You ever see Zach Morris on that gigantic cell phone? That was the kind of cell phone that was most prominent at the time. And if you saw a kid at Washington State University talking on a cell phone, it was like, boy, that guy must be a baller. He must be a rich kid or something like that. So it's kind of funny. I graduated without a email address and a cell phone. So I get into this guy. The guy that hired me was a guy by the name of Rocco Macaron, and he was just a terrific dude. And Rocco says to me, okay, we got a job. It's weekend graphics, and you use Photoshop to put together graphics. And again, not being being a technological dummy, I was like, man, I don't even know what that is. So I'm trying to give away the job, which is not a smart thing to do to all of you. And he says, look, we're going to take care of all this stuff for you. We just want to get your foot in the door. You're going to get trained and everything's going to be okay. So I actually started my career 2 days a week, working Saturdays and Sundays in Bellevue, Washington, building graphics, which is not a real likely way to start off your career as a sportscaster. But it was a really, really great time, and it was a lot of fun. And next thing you know, they started moving me up the ladder quicker than I could even expect. So these were anchor-driven shows, and so we didn't have a lot of reporters out in the field going to ball games and things like that. So the next place I got to go was the assignment desk. Does anyone know what an assignment desk is and how that works in a newsroom? Okay. So in a newsroom, breaking news is obviously happening all the time. And so you have to have people kind of with their finger on the trigger, hearing, they listen to police scanners. They stay in communication with our parent company, talking about all this stuff that's going on around the area. And then you figure out ways to go out and get that stuff covered. So I started on the assignment desk, and when you're working at a sports station, a lot of times breaking news is a press conference announcing, the Supersonics just signed Ray Allen, or the Seahawks just got a stud running back. And so you get to go to these press conferences, and they're a lot more fun than, political things or town hall meetings or stuff like that. So in essence, I kind of got some reporter training or a master's degree at Fox, and then something happened that really changed, my direction. is they made me a producer, which was a terrific promotion, and it comes with a lot of responsibility, and producing is one of the most important positions that you can have at a television station. And I'll never forget the guy that promoted me, a great friend of mine by the name of Brian Clapp. And Brian walked me over to my desk. So basically he gave me a seat in the newsroom, and I remember looking at that desk, and it kind of looked like a jail cell to me. And it was like, really? So now I'm going to be sitting down all day on a computer, hacking away and working on shows, which was great. It really helped me hone my writing, but I wanted to be out in the field. It was like somebody kind of clipped my wings. So I decided, okay, I'm going to take a stab at this reporter thing. And the way that you do this, a lot of people are probably wondering, how do you actually go about, setting the stones in motion to do this? So when you're shooting stand-ups and reporting places, you call this a stand-up. So, hey, I'm Adam Mikulich, and this is center court over at the Utah Valley University, where they're gearing up to face a team. So those are your on-air presence points. So you start stringing together enough of those things and putting them on a tape, and basically you kind of put together a reel that presents yourself. It's kind of an ego-driven thing, but you kind of have to do it. You want yourself to look good. And they say that a news director who's going to hire you probably knows within the first 45 seconds, you know what, I like this guy, I'll keep watching. Nope, that guy's not going to work. So my first resume tapes were horrific. I mean, just awful. I had this thing for this awkward way of standing, and I don't know why my arm would go right behind my back, and then my hand would come out every once in a while, and I was just terrible. And I remember sitting with editors, and they'd put this stuff together for me, and they're like, yeah, it's good, Adam. It's real good, and send it to places like Montana and Idaho. And Coos Bay, Oregon was the first place I interviewed for a job. And my tapes were just awful. And then through producing, and through writing and blocking and figuring out the flow of a television show, I gradually got a lot better. And so next thing you know, I'm sitting next to an editor, and he's like, this ain't bad. You might actually get a job. So I started sending out tapes, and in January, February of 2004, a station in Southeast Idaho, KIFI Local News 8, came calling, and this quirky news director by the name of Jim Nagy, Mr. Mikulich, your tape's fantastic, and I went to Washington State University myself. I hear great things about you. How do you feel about coming and working in Southeast Idaho? And I said, well, when can you fly me in for the job interview? And he says, well, we don't have a big budget, so just tell me over the phone whether you like it or not. And this isn't just one of those things where you can go, and then 2 or 3 months later, it's like, I made a huge mistake, I gotta get out of here. In television, to protect yourselves from instances exactly like that, people who hire you confine you to a contract. So this is, you're coming here, you have to be here for 2 years, otherwise you have to pay us $4,000, that's a buyout clause, that's a real thing. The offer, I'm not even joking, I'm not going to give you an exact figure. You'll figure it out for yourselves one day if you decide to do this. It was going to work out to be about $20,000 less than what I had made the previous year in Fox Sports. It was literally below the poverty line. And I had a girlfriend at the time, and she was working out of town. And we talked it over, and she's like, sounds like you got to do it. And called my uncle, who's a sportscaster in Spokane. He says, it sounds like you got to do it. And so I took the leap of faith without even going and visiting the town. It was just a cold call. It was the craziest thing I'd ever done. I remember waking up the next day going, what have I done? And then I had this great family at Fox Sports that I was going to have to say goodbye to. And it turned out to be the greatest thing that ever happened to me. In my first year and a half in Southeast Idaho, I was just terrible. I mean, I remember seeing an old video of me at the anchor desk. I didn't even sit up straight. And here's this hunched down, underconfident guy, and this hand would come out every once in a while. Again, the hand, I don't know what my thing was there. But gradually you're working so hard, and you start doing this stuff on a daily basis, a weekly basis. You start doing it all the time, and you gradually get a little better and a little better. And I thought for sure at the end of that 2-year contract, I was going to be good enough to get back to Seattle. I was going to go back, work at Fox Sports. No, I was nowhere near that good. But I applied for jobs and tried to get feedback and tried to get a hook. And next thing you know, I had been working as the weekend guy in Pocatello, to Bureau in Pocatello, and then the main sports guy got a new job, and so they asked me to sign a new 2.5-year contract and get promoted to the main sports guy position. I didn't want anything to do with it, and it turned out to be a huge difference maker when I finally buckled down and decided I was going to take that job. So in all, I was in Southeast Idaho in 4 years, and again, that's where I met you, and he remembers me from Southeast Idaho. I was a lot younger back then, and by the end of it all, I had been doing this half-hour sports show on Friday nights, and I kept getting a little bit better and better, and my contract was up in December of 2008, and so the fall of 2007, I did a little soul searching, and went on a wonderful fly fishing trip in Yellowstone, and thought about other career paths. I mean, is there something else I can do and change and decide to do differently? But I decided I wanted to keep going. So I came back, and then that fall, I devoted all my extra time to putting together a resume tape. Again, you guys, who remembers the resume tape that I talked about? The little reel promoting yourself. I put together a pretty good tape, started sending it out, and I ended up getting bites from a station in Austin, Texas. That's where University of Texas is, and Champaign, Illinois, where the University of Illinois is. And the station in Texas treated me like they'd be doing me a big favor by giving me the job, didn't fly me out for an interview. And then the station in Champaign, Illinois treated me like I was this hot young quarterback recruit. And so I went out there for a 3-day job interview, and they wined and dined me. And I interviewed in the suit for the first time ever. I felt so big time. And stayed in a hotel. And I ended up taking the job. So they assigned me to a 2.5-year deal. And I remember driving back to St. Louis. I flew into St. Louis actually for the job interview, and my dad calls, and my poor parents had just been on eggshells just waiting for the news. I mean, here, God, is he going to stay in Idaho, or is he going all the way to the Midwest? So I broke the news, hey, I think I'm going to take this job and go. And I remember my dad, who doesn't throw around compliments a ton, said, gosh, we are so proud of you, we can hardly stand it. And it was another big moment. So here I was moving to Big Ten country, and I not only got the job, but it was the main sports guy job. I mean, so there was a lot of pressure. And I think at the time I didn't grasp how much pressure it was. So I wasn't going there and kind of easing in as the weekend guy like I did in Idaho. I went there and became the main face of sports right away. And it was a lot of work. And the best part about it, though, I'm a huge baseball fan. Remember me telling you about going to the Kingdome, back in the day and watching the Mariners? I got to cover the Cubs, Cardinals, and the White Sox, and they were long trips in various directions, but I got to spend a lot of time in those ballparks. I've actually stood on the grass at Wrigley Field for batting practice and watched the bleachers fill up, and it's one of the neatest things I think I've ever seen. I covered the 2009 Baseball All-Star Game in St. Louis, which is a lifelong dream of mine. It was my introduction to Big Ten basketball, Illinois, Ohio State, Michigan State. I got to go to all these universities, mostly by car, and they're really long driving trips, but it was a lot of fun. I went to a game at Penn State University. It was a night game with the whiteout going. Great memories. And then the economy collapsed. And I think a lot of you were probably young when it happened, and it probably affected your parents more than it affected you, but it was a really, really rough time. I remember being really scared. And we lost 30 people. The television industry got hit really hard because everybody stopped advertising right away. And that's a big part of our revenue in television is through advertising. So when the economy collapsed, let's say we had in Champaign a station of 60 people, we lost 30 overnight in one day. So the woman in PR, the woman in HR who signed me up for my benefits and helped me kind of get settled, I ran into her bagging groceries a few days later, and it just broke my heart. And luckily things have kind of gotten back on track. Our general manager sold a sports show at the time, and it was devoted to University of Illinois athletics, and so my life really changed. I went to working a 6-day work week, never less than 55 hours. There was a lot of travel involved. And at the end of it all, they kind of restructured the department, and I decided with the management at the station we were going to do a hard out. So what that means is, as of July 2010, I was no longer going to be employed by the station. So I now had a timeline and a deadline for finding a new job. Otherwise, I was going to go move back home and live in my parents' basement, which is not an option. And no offense, Mom and Dad, if they're watching on Facebook here. So I started putting out those resume tapes again. And I can't tell, every time I bring up the resume tape, do you see it's like a here we go again? I can't tell you how exhausting it is putting these stinking things together. It's nerve-wracking. But again, all of a sudden it was like, this isn't a bad tape. And I do all my editing. I was like, I remember showing it to my girlfriend at the time, And she watched about a minute and a half of it. She goes, turn it off, turn it off, turn it off. And I was like, what? Is it terrible? And she goes, no, you're going to get a job. And she was sad and she didn't want me to go. And I ended up hearing from stations, again, Austin, Texas. I don't know what it is with me in Texas, but they must like me there. Haven't worked there. Austin, Texas, Spokane, Washington, which was supposed to be the place. That's where my aunt and uncle were. I mean, they're media icons in that market. And then Salt Lake City, Utah. And I remember it was my birthday, and so that window's shrinking. We're getting closer to July, and I'm going to be out on the streets. And I remember having, again, phone call with my parents, and they had me on speakerphone on my birthday. Happy birthday, Adam. And finally my dad said, well, we hate to ask, but we kind of have to because we're your parents. Do you have any job prospects on the horizon? I said, well, yeah, there's one that I haven't told you about, and I was really excited, but it kind of fell off the shelf, meaning I hadn't heard back in a month. And they're like, well, where's the job? I said, Salt Lake City. Wow, that's a pretty good market, isn't it? And it is. That would have been we deal in market sizes in TV, and this is a, decidedly bigger market than Champaign, Illinois. So my dad says, so you haven't heard back in a month? I said, yeah, that's correct. And he says, well, I guess there's no harm in giving him a phone call then. I said, you know what, you're right, but I'm not going to give a phone call. I'm going to send an email. So right after I got off the phone with him, the guy who hired me here in Salt Lake City, his name is Steve Hertzke. He's still with us. He's one of our executive producers. Great guy. I just sent him a quick email. Hey, Mr. Hertzke, this is Adam Mikulich from Champaign, Illinois. Just wondering if I'm still on the shelf or if I'm even in your top 5. And he wrote me back instantly. And again, it's what a great feeling, to know that you're still kind of in the running for a position. He says, no, not only are you on our list, you're on our short list, it's down to you and one other candidate. So again, if it's not painful enough being in a state of uncertainty, knowing that it's down between 2 people, you and someone else, who the heck is this other guy? And you sit there and you overthink and you overanalyze situations. So at the end of it all, I love this part of the story. I ended up going and interviewing for a job in Spokane. And again, I was supposed to be the heir to the sports throne in that market because my uncle was there for so long. And I'm crazy about him. We're great friends. And I actually told him just last night that I was going to be speaking here for you guys today. And so after I interviewed and he asked me how it went and then ripped me apart, he's like, you're an idiot. You're not going to get the job. I told him some things that I said, and I'm brutally honest. We're out doing trivia later that night, and his cohort, who still works as a sportscaster in that market, comes and he bellies up at the table and he asked me how it was going. I said, yeah, I think it went well, and but I didn't want the job like I thought I would. It didn't sound fun. They were really inspecific. So my uncle's friend says to me, and he's another big time name in that market, he says, who else is interested? I said, Salt Lake City. And he pulled me in real close and he says, if you get a job offer in Salt Lake City, that's where you go. You don't go anywhere else. You don't come here. I don't care how close your family is. You go to Salt Lake City because it's a great market. Next thing you know, I'm at the airport the next day after finishing up. Day 3 was the worst day of the 3-day interview process. No offense to Mark Bowling, the nice man who had me out there. But basically, he sat me down for coffee and said, our benefits are terrible, you're not going to get a lot of vacation, and we're still pretty inspecific on what the job criteria is. It's like, well, God, that sounds great. So I get to the Spokane airport, which is a tiny little airport. I go into the bathroom, change out of my suit, pulled on a pair of shorts, put on a t-shirt, went and stood in the corner, took a couple of deep breaths, and then dialed Steve Hertzke in Salt Lake City's number, and I said a short prayer that I would get his voicemail. I didn't want to talk to him, but I wanted to leave him a message. You know that feeling, right? Well, now everybody text messages, and so, it's different. So I said, Mr. Hertzke, and I got his voicemail. It was terrific. Mr. Hertzke, this is Adam Mikulich. Just wrapped up a 3-day job interview in Spokane, Washington. Would love to talk as soon as possible. Have a nice day. Yes. So anyway, I turn off my phone, get on the plane, get to Minneapolis, turned on my phone, and I was just hoping that there would be a voicemail there. Voicemail, listen to it. Mr. Mikulich, this is Steve Hertzke. This is awful news that you just interviewed in Spokane. Please call me as soon as possible. Click, yes. So I call him back, and he says to me, and he regrets saying this because we still had to go through a whole job interview process. He says, how would you like to move to Salt Lake City? And I said, that sounds fantastic. Hung up the phone. went to a water. You ever been to the airport in Minnesota? It's like a mini Mall of America. It's a phenomenal place. So I found a nice place to eat, bellied up at the bar, got a drink and something to eat, and it's a real busy airport bar. And I raised my glass, and all these people around me are going, "Who's the knucklehead raising his glass?" And I go, "I just got a new job." And the whole place rips up and gives me a round of applause. And next thing you know, I had drinks lined up the rest of the day. So it was just a huge victory. And to be able to tell all my friends, because it's such close proximity to Southeast Idaho, where I really had a good time, I just didn't know it, that I was moving back. No, you're working so hard. If you guys get a job, you work so tirelessly. It's such a demanding profession. You're having such a great time, you don't even realize it. So moving back here, it was a second chance. It's something I really wanted to do, and I got to become a reporter for the first time ever. So the difference between an anchor and a reporter, the anchor is this guy sitting at the desk. The reporter is this guy out in the field, and the wind in his hair and the open road. And I always wanted to travel, but I didn't get to travel that much. I wanted to do live shots, live reporting, but I didn't get to do it that much in these small markets. And if you're any good, come on in, man. If you're any good, they try and make you an anchor, but I wanted to be a reporter. So to come to KUTV and to have two guys in front of me, the great Dave Fox, the great David James, I got to be a reporter for the first time, and it's been an absolute blast. I have had so much fun. My first big story, you guys remember Jimmer Fredette from just down the road at BYU. So his senior season, when they made that great run to the Sweet 16, our state was just turned upside down. So we were the hub of it all, obviously. So I had never been to New York until they flew me all the way to upstate New York to go tell his backstory. I went there and met with his brother. He was kind of my unofficial tour guide. Went to his ward where he played church ball. Went to a prison where he was rumored to play prison ball. No, it's a true story. It was a proactive program for the inmates. They got to play pickup games, and it's real therapeutic. So the general manager at the time, who was a big BYU fan, BYU honk, I like to say, and he says to me, "Mr. Mikulich, we have all the faith in the world in you," which translates to, "Get this done right or it's your butt." And he says, "I want you to dribble down the hallway where he played church ball. I want you to go to the prison and get video of the court where he played against prison inmates." In the back of my mind, I thought, not going to happen. "And I want you to go to his favorite pizza joint and eat a piece of pizza." Dribbled down the hallway, went to Angelina's and ate pizza, went up to the steps of the prison where he played prison ball. The door opened, and it's the only time in my life I've had a shotgun put in my face. And I backed off and said, "You know what? We'll come back another day." And he said, "See that tree over there that's painted white? If you stand behind that tree, you can shoot video." So the one shot we got was a real distance away shot. Jimmer took me to Vegas for the first time for conference basketball. Took me to Denver for round one of the NC2A tournament, and then I'd never been to New Orleans. And I was in New Orleans for a week for the Sweet 16. It was just awesome. Since then, I've covered, I don't think I've ever missed a BYU opener. I'm always on the road with them. I've been with the Utes and the Aggies to different bowl games. I'm with UVU in Vegas every single year for the Mountain West tournament. I've got to see some really cool things. And what I really love about our market too is that we cover high school sports, which is the root of everything. I come from a long line of teachers and coaches. I think teachers and coaches are the most wonderful people in the world. And so to get to be in a place that really likes high school sports coverage. I go to Friday night football games and basketball games. I do a focus piece called Prep of the Week every week, where I find a kid who's doing really good things on the field, good things in the classroom, or maybe they have, I met a kid who is a track star who actually dresses up as a clown and visits sick kids in hospitals just because he gets a kick out of it. So I get to tell these wonderful stories. Met an Olympian last week. And again, I always wanted to be a reporter and get out in the field, and it's just been absolutely wonderful. And I'm kind of learning to slow down a little bit. If that story seems like things move pretty quickly, from me starting at 22 as a production assistant to I'm going to turn 40 in April, and it's gone by real quick. And I've kind of learned to slow down a little bit. I was always go, 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 and that's everything. Even on vacation, okay, we got to go here, because everything in television is so calculated. And I can be up at 4 o'clock in the morning on a given day But no matter where I am, about 10 o'clock at night, this little mechanism goes off in me, and I perk right up, and it's like, okay, it's time to do the news, you know? But that's just kind of how I'm wired these days. I remember a couple summers ago being home to help my parents with this massive yard project that was just a pain in the ass. And it was exhausting. And I remember falling. I'm not a napper. I've never been able to take naps, even if I really try to. And I started falling asleep in armchairs, just sitting up. And I remember being half in and out of sleep at one point during that trip. It was just a couple summers ago. And I could hear my mom walk into the room, but I pretended like I was asleep. And I could hear her say to my dad, "Oh, thank God he's wearing out." So yeah, that's me. How are we doing on time? Someone's keeping track for me.
10 minutes.
We got about 10 minutes left? Okay. I guess we got to open it up for Q&A. I brought some videos. Maybe we can watch a video if you guys want to. I brought one of those awful resume tapes. I brought a really old one. Would you guys like to see that?
Yeah.
Or, do we have time for that and then a couple questions?
Yes.
Okay. Can somebody help me out with this? Okay, this is an old resume tape. So if I look a little skinnier and a little younger, it's because I was. But you'll be able to see the one of the stories from my trip to Glens Falls with Jimmer, where I dribbled down the hallway, and then kind of a montage of stand-ups and things like that. Sorry, I walked out of frame here. While he's queuing this up, does anybody have a quick question? Yeah, please.
Who helped you put together the...
I do it all on my own. I do every last bit of it on my own. I'm what you call a MMJ or one-man band. I can shoot my own video. I can edit my own stories. I can even set up, I'll find someone tall like you. I could be in a different state. I could be in a different country with a camera. Set it up on a tripod. Say, "Hey, sir, can I borrow you for a second? Would you just stand over here real quick and I'll kind of focus on him? Take a microphone and put it at his feet. Thank you very much, sir. You can go now." Oh, that's it. And then they leave. And then I literally go take their place, grab the microphone, and I can shoot myself like this. So I put together my own resume tapes.
Where did you learn to do that?
On the job training. When I went, at Fox Sports, I got to learn a little bit about editing, mostly non-linear, not the linear stuff that they do today. But one day in Idaho, I needed to put a story together, spent about 2-3 hours in an edit bay and taught myself how to use Final Cut Pro. Does that sound familiar to anybody in here? That's how I learned. I mean, it's basically when I got to Idaho, here's a camera, here's a microphone, go tell stories. Well, I need a little guidance. You went to college for this, go do it. Does that make sense? It's a tough world out there.
They teach you to do that, which is helpful because you have to
Yep. Oh, it's absolutely helpful, yeah. Okay, you guys ready? All right.
These are going to roll over and die when Mother Nature rears her ugly head. There's also about 25 different species of rockfish that you can come away with, including this guy right here, which happens to be called a yellow eye. Jimmer had to dribble down this hallway, showcasing all of his moves with people jumping out from around corners. Only thing, he had to do it in the dark.
Pulled pork with a little coleslaw.
Oh, yeah.
And we get a smoked corn on the cob.
So the players love it, the ownership loves him, I love it. Push right through, and all right, good work. Okay. This is awful. Still some solid ice out on the practice field here in Provo, but that hasn't stopped the Cougars from going full speed and full pads. And I mean full speed and full pads. We've been out here for about 20 minutes with absolutely nothing going on. Thought it was a sea bass at first, it's definitely not. Well, that's nice. Big fish. Well, it took listening to a little trash talk and 3 overtimes for the Jazz to top the defending champs last night. And in the end, we're calling this one of the marquee wins of this entire season, in large part because it keeps them a part of the playoff picture. The Jazz sit just a half game back to the Suns and the Rockets, as things will not change via the teams in action tonight.
So this is an anchor segment,
With the Blazers and
based on the 10 o'clock news, right here.
That was the Delonte West game.
Yeah, the Wet Willie. Yeah, that was what that was the...
3 straight heading into tomorrow night, and then
That was
trio of
what got
home games to line things
muffed out.
Orlando minus Dwight Howard on Saturday. Phoenix is in town a week from today, and then the Blazers again to round out the regular season on Thursday. There's 6 o'clock tip for that one. Speaking of football, the 17th annual National Football Foundation Awards went down in Orem tonight, put on to pay tribute to local high school stars each year. And the event was even hosted by our own Dave Fox, and though that is not in fact the tuxedo he wore on his senior prom. Amongst others, Dave was joined by the newest addition of our Utah football family. No, he's no stranger to Utah. Weber State head coach John L. Smith, who has been all over the country as a coach and touts the education system here in the Beehive State.
You get around the country a little bit, and
Also tonight, the BYU baseball team hosting Utah and the youth winning 6-4 in Provo.
So Dave in a tuxedo. I wonder if he does it like he does here, with tuxedo on the top and then shorts
And then jeans on the bottom.
Yeah.
Sneakers.
He really does that.
Sneakers.
I used
I don't know if
to.
that'd fly. They call it a black tie event. So
he was sitting down.
I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt, but it's Dave. So.
We'll be right back.
Fall football camp is all about getting in game shape, but also
This is the kind of story news directors want to see these days.
they're stretching, icing, refueling, most importantly, hydrating.
Water?
But at BYU, water's for wimps.
Well, we've used pickle juice. We're doing a lot of IVs for the more humid, hot games on players, and we started using pickle juice when we saw that number of IVs that we were doing significantly dropped, some games to 0. So we felt like we were onto something. We've been using it ever since.
Now, for athletes, a lack of potassium is actually what causes cramping. The original remedy for that is lots of bananas. But while it tastes salty, vinegar, which happens to be the main component found in pickle juice, can actually be used to remove sodium from the body, thus boosting an athlete's levels of potassium and magnesium. And in the end, it equals no cramps. An instant shot of endurance. Dang it.
If I got like a cramp in my hamstring or whatever, and I get some pickle juice, it just, I don't know why, but it releases and loosens up.
I used to drink vegan juice.
This is a real thing, by the way.
In high school,
Yeah.
and it's pretty much tastes about the same.
You ever drink pickle juice after practice?
No, I stay away from pickle juice.
Oh, come on.
no, I just make sure I keep myself hydrated so I don't have to use pickle juice.
I'm Adam Mikulich, talking sports.
He may be thinking Utah.
Are we doing okay on time?
Even bigger in his
Okay.
hometown. We said Adam Mikulich there this
This is
week.
part one when I went to
He
Glens
has
Falls.
evidently hit the East Coast as well.
The town of Glens Falls lives in the shadow of the Adirondacks in upstate New York. The listed population is just over 14,000, but you can tack on +1 if you include a favorite son playing basketball at BYU.
He transcends basketball. People that you might not see at sporting events during the regular course of the year suddenly want to know about Jimmer because he's such an outstanding young man that he's touched them that way.
The home that Jimmer Fredette grew up in is located in the central part of town, and you're not going to believe this. It's on the corner of Ogden Street and Logan Avenue with Smith Street due east. His parents have located to Taylorsville for the tail end of the season, but the person Jimmer credits for his mental toughness was able to validate stories that he used to play against prison inmates in pickup games.
Where's the prison?
That were great, you know what I mean? We went in and played last year, and they were asking me, how's Jimmer doing and stuff like that, because they got to watch the game when he played in Florida, and they hear the stories in the media and everything like that, so they followed Jimmer, and he's got a lot of good fans in there.
Another link to his Nerves of Steel used to happen at the Glens Falls ward, where he used to do an interesting drill. Jimmer had to dribble down this hallway, showcasing all of his moves with people jumping out from around corners. Only thing, he had to do it in the dark.
This is the gauntlet right here. This is it. This is where, we tested his dribbling skills, his ball handling. This is where he learned to keep his dribble tight. You got to keep it close to your body because it's very narrow in here. And then once we turn those lights off, it simulates keeping your head up on the court. He had to keep his head up so he could see the light at the end of the hall.
We also ate lunch at the Fredette's favorite pizza joint. Angelina's is owned by close family friends and East Coast through and through. All right, it's a tough decision, but I'm going to go with the Jimmer special.
Oh man, we can hook that up definitely. You want to hit some threes today, huh?
Yeah, you got to hook up back, right?
Definitely, man. We'll hook that up for sure.
All right.
He's already doing commercials for us as it is, so I don't have to talk him into much. He's a great kid, great guy. He's getting to be a guy. He ain't no little kid no more.
But the place he's most missed is Glens Falls High School, where he was a multi-sport athlete. Basketball was obviously the staple, but a future in football was a real possibility.
He probably would have been offered, and this is absolutely no slight on BYU basketball, but the football equivalent would have been higher in my estimation. I think he could have been that good. But his heart was so into basketball, and it wasn't there with football.
What has he done to kind of turn this place upside down and put it on the map, so to speak.
He knows a lot of people here, obviously, and when he played in high school, we didn't only get Glens Falls people coming to our games. We got people from the surrounding areas that came and watched and filled the crowd because they knew something special was happening.
Tonight's also BYU game night here in upstate New York, which actually means big business for local watering holes like the Lawrence Street Tavern. Tonight's game with Colorado State will be shown on the big screen. They're having drink specials, and they're expecting about 80 people to show up, all in honor of the hometown kid.
The people that he's gotten to walk through my door.
Why don't you stop it down? Yeah.
He's zoomed my...
Sorry I got so long-winded there. Yeah. Anyway, it's really a beautiful thing when a story all kind of comes together. And, maybe hearing me talk about it a little bit and then see all the different points and counterpoints. And, I was really proud of that story. I'm sorry I took so long. Does anybody have any questions? Yeah. Go.
Game ever covered?
Oh, wow. That's really tough, but for dramatic purposes, I was there in Nebraska with BYU in 2015 when the Hail Mary was thrown. I was right there in the end zone and got a beautiful shot of it coming down. And you never can tell when you're going to be someplace and something just incredible. And in that moment, it became the biggest game in the entire country. Yeah, so I guess that's probably got to be it. Yeah. These two work on Utah Grizzlies hockey broadcasts with me. Yeah, nice to see you guys. Yeah, what do you got?
I was just wondering, I hear a lot lately about the imposter syndrome is when you get into a situation that you think is kind of above your pay grade and you don't feel qualified. It seems like you might have been in some of those situations. I'm wondering how you deal with those kinds of
Oh, wow, that's a really, really good question. You know what? You got to do it. You got to go through tough times to get to where you want to be, and especially when it comes to television. I didn't necessarily want to go to Southeast Idaho, and again, I took a $20,000 pay cut. But how else was I going to grow? Who else was going to put me on TV when I was just young and awful? You need to go someplace where the people are kind and forgiving, and they're used to young faces coming in through the newsroom. You got to go and skin your knees a little bit. Does that make sense? Yeah, and I wanted to go to Champaign, and it turned out to be kind of a tough racket with the economy collapsing and everything. But both of those steps were completely instrumental to me getting here and having as much fun as I am now. Yeah. Okay, thanks you guys. I hope, I didn't mean for it to get so foggy there in the middle if it did, but you guys have really been a nice audience. Thank you so much. Yeah.